Welcome to the session, Reimagining Tourism and Hospitality. Please join me in welcoming our moderator for this next session, Doane Liu. Liu serves as the Executive Director at the City of Los Angeles Department of Convention and Tourism Development, with the goal to further enhance and increase Los Angeles' prominence and attraction as a world-class tourist and convention destination. Welcome, Doane Liu.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for joining us today. As the announcer said, I'm Doane Liu, and I'm with the City of Los Angeles. It's my great pleasure to moderate today's panel called Reimagining Tourism and Hospitality. From the great outdoors to our theme parks and the many concerts and festivals, Southern California has much to offer visitors. I'd add, we've got a great convention center too. Tourism has helped accelerate LA County's economic prosperity, generating billions in economic impact and thousands, actually hundreds of thousands of jobs. However, the industry came to a nearly complete stop, a complete halt due to the pandemic, with the effects being felt throughout the region's economy. Today, we'll discuss the importance of this industry to our region, how businesses are managing through this period of uncertainty, and how we can help ensure it bounces back as a leading and thriving industry in our region. Please help me in welcoming our panelists today. First, we have my good friend and partner, Adam Burke, who's the president and CEO of the LA Tourism and Convention Board, where he is overseeing global brand management, brand marketing, sales strategies for the City of Los Angeles, one of the world's most diverse, unique, and innovative destinations. Next, we have Scott Santoro, one of two Scotts you'll hear from today. Scott Santoro is the Vice President of Sales for Delta Airlines, where he is responsible for strengthening Delta's presence on the West Coast through maximizing revenue and mindshare. Finally, let me introduce Scott Strobel. Scott Strobel is the Senior Vice President of Operations for Universal Studios Hollywood, where he oversees all facets of daily operations for the iconic theme park, signature behind-the-scenes studio tour, and Universal City Walk. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm going to fire off questions to you individually, but please, if anyone has anything to add, feel free to jump in. I'll start with you, Adam. California, and the LA region in particular, is a tourist destination, obviously. Describe the impact of tourism to our region's economy on a yearly basis. In other words, jobs and revenue, other metrics. And then since COVID-19, what trends have you seen in this travel and tourism industry?
Absolutely. Well, good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank Maria and her team at the Chamber for putting together a terrific event. What a lot of people may not know is that Los Angeles Tourism is a nonprofit organization, and as the official tourism marketing and sales organization for LA, we actually represent over 1,100 members across the travel and tourism space. So there's tremendous overlap between our membership and that of the Chamber, and we're just incredibly grateful for the opportunity to continue partnering with Maria and her team. So in terms of the pandemic, I think it's impossible to overstate just how devastating the impact has been on our industry. If you look back to 2019, for example, Los Angeles was coming off of 9 straight years of record growth in visitation. If you look at last year, the thing that I think I'm proudest of for our industry is really what travel and tourism does for our local economy. In 2019 alone, visitors to Los Angeles spent over $25 billion in our local business community. And we're projecting losses of more than $10 billion this year. Beyond that, I think the thing that's really been most upsetting and most tragic about this has been the job losses. What a lot of people may not realize is travel and tourism actually has grown over the last decade to become the 3rd largest employment sector in LA County. In fact, in 2019, there were almost 545,000 Angelenos who worked in tourism-related careers. And sadly, over the last 6 to 7 months, we've experienced job losses of 1 out of every 3 Angelenos employed in leisure and hospitality. So it's impossible to overstate the impact. But the thing I want to stress is I do think we're beginning to see some encouraging signs of recovery. A good example is we've been taking a very close look at consumer sentiment. And what we found most recently is 80% of Americans now have some type of tentative travel plans, and 1 in 4 actually are expecting to take a leisure trip in the next 90 days. So while certainly we still have a lot of work to do ahead of us, I think we are beginning to see early signs of recovery. And I think the thing that I would really say about our industry has been the incredible partnerships like Delta Airlines, like Universal Studios Hollywood, and all of our members, because through the county's task force, our industry has actually been partnering directly with LA County Public Health to develop the right safety protocols so that we can responsibly and safely reopen our visitor economy. And I think that's going to be the key to a sustainable reopening, is that we have to make health and safety the highest priority.
Very good. Thank you, Adam. I'm going to move to Scott Strobel. Scott, how important is Universal Studios to NBC Universal's overall revenue stream? And prior to COVID-19, what were the attendance trends that you saw at Universal Studios Hollywood?
I think my mic's on there. We were basically in a very good place looking into 2020. We had 2 brand new iconic rides that were ready to debut on a full year basis, our Jurassic World attraction and our brand new Pets ride. And we were very optimistic about where we were going in 2020. To put it in perspective, the Universal parks within NBC Universal represent almost a third of the entire operating profit of NBC Universal. And while we have reopened our parks in Orlando, Japan, and Singapore, our Hollywood park is still the lone park that has not reopened. And we are very eager to get reopened and move along.
Any comment on how Universal Studios Hollywood fits into the overall NBC Universal world?
Yeah, again, we make up, Universal Parks overall make up about a third of what NBC Universal's operating profit is. And then of that, we're about a quarter of that third, Universal Studios Hollywood. So again, it is a big impact for our parent company. But I think, even bigger than that, and Adam touched on it, is the human side of this. We were currently employing, prior to our shutdown, about 8,000 employees this time last year. And we have just a small fraction of that still working, doing the basic maintenance on the park right now, and are really eager to get those individuals back to work.
Very good, thanks. Scott Santoro. The airline industry is one of the most affected industries due to COVID-19. I know we saw something like a 95% drop when this first started. What has Delta done to pivot and to stay afloat? And how are you encouraging travel? And lastly, tell us about the safety measures you folks have implemented.
Sure, Don. Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and good afternoon to those that aren't on the West Coast. It was a challenging time, Don, for sure. I mean, just like Universal Studios and Scott and his plight with trying to reopen the parks, we had to put the airline to sleep. Generally, our mantra has been to connect the world, and we had to disconnect the world quite a lot from about mid-March, March 13th, when the pandemic and the state of emergency hit, for a few months. I mean, really, we were down just a few hundred flights a day, down from over 4,000 flights a day. But we had to throw the playbook out, Don. We had to really look at sort of what our calling was going to be. And the first thing we decided was we had to put people over profits, as our culture has done for 9 decades now. And that is something that really became paramount. And if we focused on just profitability and sort of revenue generation, then we wouldn't have gotten through this. And so we put a number of measures in place, but we took much like all the panelists on the phone here, we took our playbook and threw it out the window. So all of our objectives for 2020 sort of went by the wayside, and we really had to focus on three core values. And the first was safety and health. Not only the safety and health of our employees, but our safety and health of our customers. And so we had to make people feel comfortable about flying again. And that wasn't easy during a pandemic, but I'll talk about that here in a minute, because I know that was your second question on what we did. But ultimately, we had to do cash preservation as well. And so at one point in time, we were losing about $100 million a day. $100 million a day. And this was for a company that's been profitable for 10 straight years, almost every quarter of those 10 straight years, and really, really impacted us. And so we had to seize that moment, really get all the cost out of the business, that whether it was deferral aircraft or whether it was, quite frankly, just looking at different ways of doing business. And we did that. We're down to just about under 20 million a day now. And so still significant, but certainly down almost 4 or 5-fold since that time. And then we had to put our restoration, our recovery plan in place. No matter the pandemic, no matter the incident, no matter the global crisis, the first thing people think about, and I know Scott knows this, but the first thing people think is travel, leisure, all of that is gone. Technology and virtual or what have you will take over. That's just hasn't been true for the last 20, 30 years, if you will. And so every time travel comes back even that much faster and that much more accelerated. And so we're trying to prepare for that. And to the second question that you asked, and sort of how did we maintain cleanliness, much like theme parks and much like hotels and other businesses, we had to look at every aspect of the journey. We had to study our curb drop-off process, how you check a bag in, how you speak with a customer service agent, whether it's putting plexiglass in the between any employee to customer interaction. We had to look at TSA and security. We had to partner with them, make sure that we had antimicrobial bins in several airports now. We had to put disinfectant at the TSA stations. We had to space people out. And then we had to go all the way to our sort of clubs, if you will, or the lounges, and really look at that and sort of look at every protocol that existed. Then we looked at boarding. Then we looked at cleaning every aircraft with an electrostatic sprayer. Every turn, every plane that came into an airport was cleaned. Really re-examined the whole process. We put masks in place very early. You're not getting on board Delta flight unless you have your mask on. And we've asked almost over 350 people that refuse to put a mask on to no longer travel with Delta, particularly during this pandemic. We need safety. We need that paramount focus. And then, of course, what we didn't focus enough on pre-pandemic is sort of air quality on board the aircraft. Much like our homes and many businesses, we really focused on the HEPA air filter that exists on board. And so what people didn't realize, and we never focused on and showcasing, was sort of air circulates amongst your row, and it's sort of with every 2 to 4 minutes of fresh air put in as well. And so all of these facets had to be communicated, collaborated with many different industry partners across the airports, and we had to make customers feel safe again. And all of that in a nutshell, we probably did anywhere between day 15 of the pandemic all the way to about day 90, with a lot of initiatives put in place. And here we are on almost over day 180, and we're putting more measures in place each and every day. So it's about influencing travel and making sure that we put people over profits, and that has been our success so far.
Very good. Thank you, Scott. Go back to Scott Strobel. We've read about the governor sending his staff to Orlando and other places around the country to check out states that have opened their theme parks. What can we learn from your Orlando parks and your peers in the industry that have already opened? And what safety measures do you have planned at Universal Studios Hollywood?
Yeah, thanks, Doane. we have worked our parks in Orlando, both the Universal Studios parks as well as Walt Disney World, have been in operation, our parks since June, the beginning of June, over 4 months now. And the Walt Disney World Resort opened nearly 3 months ago. And I will say, as an industry, and this is backed up by public health in Orange County in Orlando, there have been no known clusters of COVID outbreaks relating to theme park operation. And I will say, just to reiterate, that's zero. There's nothing that has been attributed. So I think we're very proud of the policies, the procedures that we've put together. And we've worked with industry experts as well as our colleagues across the industry to develop safety standards. And we looked at it much the way that Scott, from Delta mentioned their process in really 3 different categories. We looked at everything along the overall guest journey, first looking at the screening, then looking at the spacing of guests, and then how do we manage the sanitation. So we kind of bucketed everything into those 3 areas and just went piece by piece through the guest journey and laid out, I think, what will be regarded as some of the best practices that we've ever collaborated through across the industry. Safety in theme parks is in our DNA. I mean, that's just what we do. We are so reliant on ensuring that we have a safe environment for our guests, and we have nothing less than that and have delivered nothing less than that with the parks that we have reopened across our industry.
Following up on that, I know you have a lot of obviously outdoor activities at the theme parks. Are you doing anything special or limiting attendance on the kind of those indoor, maybe virtual rides that I know you have at Universal?
Yeah, I mean, we are working with the state of California in terms of the guidelines. There are some limitations that have come in other industries with the interior spaces. Of course, we would abide by the same guidelines that are in place for retail as well as food service, indoor dining. And we are looking at ways to minimize the amount of time that they are in indoor spaces and indoor queues. I will say, for those of you who have experienced a theme park attraction, the actual ride experience is really not very long. And, so the amount of time that people are in these indoor locations is relatively short in their overall day. We are largely a outdoor experience. And when you look at the 6 to 7 hours that our guests spend with us, nearly 90% of that is going to be in an outdoor environment. So that's really the key crux of what a theme park is all about and why we think we can operate very safely.
Very good, thanks. Adam, I'm going to come back to you. Please tell us how the hotel and convention industries have been impacted by COVID-19. And have you seen some improvement in the last months as strict safety guidelines have been implemented?
Sure, and I'd like to pick up on a couple themes that Scott had mentioned. The first thing is, I think, Scott, I love the way you described it, people above profits. This is one of those unique times in our industry where I think the only way we get through this is together. So similarly, Los Angeles Tourism has waived member dues for all of 2020 because we know that our members are hurting and we want to try to help support them through that. The second thing is, I think given everything we've been talking about in terms of safety, I think there's a little bit of almost a false narrative that's been out there that somehow health and safety protocols are at odds with economic recovery. And I think the thing that's important for us all to take away from today is the fact that actually they go hand in hand. I think the only way that we can effectively have a sustainable reopening across all industry sectors is to ensure that we have the right health and safety protocols. And I would actually argue that the travel and tourism industry is probably the best prepared to do that. Because as Scott said about the parks and as well as the airlines, we've been dealing with these type of protocols for decades. And even though this is unprecedented in order of magnitude, we've learned a lot of lessons from things like SARS and H1N1. So I think we're best positioned to make sure that consumers and groups can have a safe experience. Focusing on the hotels, in answer to your question, the hotels were one of the first groups to really lean into this, and a lot of the hotels never really closed. They continue to operate, and I think we can all be very proud of the fact that they've done things like hosting first responders, working with relief workers, and over 4,000 members of our homeless community have been housed through Project Roomkey. In terms of the impact on the hotels, though, it's been even more significant than our industry overall. So you heard me mention earlier that across our industry, we saw job losses approaching 33%. In the hotel space, that job loss has been closer to 45%. So it's been absolutely devastating. And if you think about, how many people work in travel and tourism, these are our friends, our neighbors, our family members, it's also had a downstream impact on the communities in which they live. So, the hotel community is one of the first sectors where we really want to try and responsibly get people back to work. I will say there's been some good news on that front. If you had told me 6 months ago that we would be celebrating hotel occupancies of 50%, I would have thought you were crazy. But actually, the month of August was the first time since the onset of the pandemic, first time since February, that for the entire month, hotel occupancies in Los Angeles exceeded 50%. And that's a major milestone. And honestly, that's very much being driven by locals. It really is a local recovery that's people taking staycations safely in their own backyard. And one of the things we're doing from a tourism perspective is we actually launched an in-market initiative called LA Love that features over 100 special offers by Angelenos and for Angelenos. And we already know from our own research that about 75% of locals are actively starting to get out and about because they've been pent up for 6 months and they want to explore safely what's in their backyard. So I think, there is some positive sign of recovery for the hotels. I think the meeting and convention piece of this is where I'll acknowledge, I think there's a bit of frustration still, because on the one hand, we want to make sure that we're very diligent about the safety protocols, but I think there's also an educational process at work here, because if you look at a small meeting, we can do that incredibly responsibly, and in a lot of ways it's no different, for example, than some of the capacity restrictions that have been put in place in the state in other business sectors. So for example, if you can have a movie theater or a shopping mall or a number of other types of venues open at 25% capacity or a maximum of 100 people, there really is no reason why we shouldn't be able to do the same thing for a small meeting, particularly because one of the benefits we have is when we hold a meeting, we actually know exactly who's coming. So our meetings industry is very prepared to do things like rapid testing, contact tracing, and that's one of the things we continue to work with both county and state public health, because right now in the state, we are not allowed to hold meetings and conventions, unlike other parts of the country. And I think there's definitely a path forward where we can safely and responsibly at least start with small to mid-sized meetings. And if you want a sense of just how massive that impact is statewide, in 2019, Oxford Economics estimates that there was about $66 billion in direct spending statewide from meetings and conventions and trade shows. And in terms of employment, it was over 450,000 jobs statewide. So we still have some work to do there for sure.
Definitely. Thank you, Adam. Let's move to Scott Santoro. Delta recently announced a massive renovation of Terminals 2 and 3 with an expected investment of almost $2 billion. What drove that decision, and how important is Los Angeles overall for Delta and its recovery?
Los Angeles is very important, Don, and picking up on even what Adam said, a minute ago, we want to fly people in here and fill up those hotels, fill up the restaurants, fill up the convention centers, and that has always been our goal. Los Angeles is a hub. We consider it a coastal hub, as it sits obviously on the West Coast, and it's been an amazing growth. The $2 billion investment that we're making. One cool thing about this pandemic, I would say, if there was any, is that we've been able to accelerate a lot of our projects forward. And so we've been really throttling up on the construction project within Los Angeles. We'll finish earlier than anticipated. And so I think you'll see some announcements here over the next few weeks as to how early we will finish. But, when the terminals went empty, March, April, May, June, as I mentioned, we went down to just a few hundred flights a day throughout the system, which really was about 30 to 40 flights in Los Angeles. We've now grown to, we'll almost be over 100 flights now in October, which is a huge, huge benefit to us. And like Adam said, I mean, I never thought 7 months ago, I'd be jumping up and down at a 50% load factor, but I'm jumping up and down at a 50% load factor. It means people feel safe, they feel comfortable. Outside of Los Angeles and including Los Angeles, what we all need to do on this web call, if you will, is really focus on the ecosystem, right? Because we can all do our part. We can all make everyone feel comfortable at the parks in the city of Los Angeles on Delta. But if we don't focus on rideshare, yellow cabs, hotels, hotel shuttles, restaurants, to make sure that when we get visitors to Los Angeles, that they feel comfortable that they've been here. They know the protocol. They know what the quarantine restrictions are, if there are any. They know where they can go to out to eat. They know what the restrictions could be. Do you make call-ahead reservations? Do you not? What is the park situation? And I think all of that encompassed into this ecosystem of travel will make us come out of this even better. And that's what I meant earlier when I talked about accelerating in the future. Don, we're trying to look forward, not look behind us. It's very easy to look back to March, April, May, feel sorry for ourselves on what happened. But I think through all of us in this collective group here, we could really make a movement if we just work together, focus on Los Angeles, focus on what we call from the Delta side, our home. And I think you'll all be proud here in the next couple of years when your passengers are either arriving or they're leaving Los Angeles as their trip is over, or Los Angelinos are getting out of town for a quick vacation outside of Los Angeles, that they'll really see a brand new terminal, a brand new structure. Terminals 2 and 3 of yesterday are not going to be terminals 2 and 3 of tomorrow. You will see a state-of-the-art terminal when you arrive, and you will see throughout the entire journey, whether it's the Sky Club check-in facilities, gates, and everything else in between. And that's what your travelers deserve. That's what people coming to Los Angeles need to realize that they're going to see. Today, they see a lot of construction, dust, and grime that's happening out at Los Angeles, and they've seen that for decades. And I proudly, as a Delta employee out here with thousands of my colleagues, stand ready to serve all of your guests and accommodations as we move into the new world. So, Don, LA is very, very important to us.
Well, I know it's important to you. Los Angeles is so important to you. I remember one of the last gatherings I attended was March 2nd, I think it was, at Griffith Observatory at night, where we had this spectacular announcement that Delta was, I think, the very first sponsor of LA 2028, and had this beautiful reception and an amazing presentation on the side of the observatory late at night. Do you want to just spend a couple of minutes telling us how important that is and what you actually announced that night?
Yeah, absolutely, Don. You ruined my closing. It's perfect, though. This is how quickly the pandemic happened. On March 2nd, we were at the top of Griffith Observatory, and Delta announced that they would be the airline for LA 28 for the Olympics, and we were so proud. And really, if you think back to that was March 2nd, 3rd, really the pandemic hit on March 13th. That's how quickly this thing really hit all of us. And little did we know, as we gathered with 200 people that evening without masks, without social distancing, those protocols weren't in place. But that makes the point of how serious we are about Los Angeles. And there's many things that we do at the mayor's office as well, whether it's junior achievement, whether it's United States Service or USO here in LA, and many things in between that we do just to make sure that Los Angeles citizens know that we are here to do business. And I look forward to not only 2028, but years leading up to 2028, because there'll be many events here in Los Angeles taking place as sort of practice or trials to get ready for those Olympics. And I'm just ready for sports. I'm ready for arts and theater to reopen here in Los Angeles. Mostly I'm ready for the parks, and including most especially Universal Studios to open up. And we will bring people to visit Los Angeles. I can promise you that.
That's great. Thank you, Scott. Well, that's a good
Thanks,
segue
Tom.
into Scott Strobel. Scott, on September 16th, Governor Newsom said that an announcement was coming very, very shortly on reopening California theme parks. We talked briefly about the governor sending his staff all over the country, but what has happened since then? And when do you expect that we'll be able to visit Universal Studios Hollywood again?
Yeah, Doane, thank you. We were encouraged, obviously, with the governor's remarks 4 weeks ago about the guidelines coming soon. And I just wanted to step back a minute, or several months before that to kind of give you a backstory. And, as an industry, the California Attractions and Park Association, which we are an active member as well as Disney and other theme parks across California, put together a comprehensive list of safety guidelines to deal in a post-COVID world. And most of those guidelines are very comparable to what our other parks that are open internationally, as well as here in Orlando and across the United States. 43 out of the 48 states that have theme parks have now reopened and reopened safely. And we definitely have a path forward on that. So after that date in May, when we submitted that, we did update our guidelines and submitted that at the end of August to represent, things including mandatory masks and other things that are part of the overall state guidelines that have evolved. And, when Governor Newsom announced that it was coming very soon, the first peek that we actually had of the proposed guidelines as an industry was the 1st of October. And on that date, we were very surprised to see how little it appeared that they had really taken into account a lot of our feedback on how the industry could operate safely. And we listened intently and wanted to engage with the governor, but asked that they not submit these guidelines because we didn't think they fully understood the industry and how we could operate safely. So we encouraged them to take a look at our operations in other parts of the United States, obviously the largest of which is in the Orlando area. And, we got word that they wanted to visit our parks and visited both Universal as well as Disney in the Orlando area last week. And I can tell you very timely, we just hosted a visit with the state delegation here at Universal Studios Hollywood yesterday. And we were able to showcase over a 3.5-hour visit all of the lengthy precautions that I alluded to early, and gave them demonstrations of here's how a ride could operate, and here's how an outdoor show would operate, and a food venue, and a retail, and how we could manage the flow of people into our parks and do that in a very safe manner. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but I think they came across with a clearer understanding of how we could operate, and I hope that leads to greater dialogue. They are visiting 2 other theme parks, and I'll let them speak to those rather than naming them specifically, but they are visiting 2 other parks today in the Southern California area, and we wish them a lot of success in their visit as well. So we are, I think, making progress, but it really does need to be a collaborative way of doing this, and it can't be just let's open theme parks at the very end or the last tier of the state guidelines, because that doesn't work for any of us. I think it's really hard to say when we may be at a tier 4, let alone even a tier 3. And, we're still in LA County in tier 1 right now, and we hope that that will move past that by the end of this month and directionally. But we are ready to put people back to work in a very safe manner, and I think we can do that in very judiciously and very safely as we move along.
Thank you, Scott. Let's move over to Adam. Adam, the next several months are a period of high uncertainty for the industry, with restrictions tightening and loosening as the number of cases fluctuate. What can we do to help the industry stay afloat through this period? And do you see us bouncing back once we have a vaccine?
Yeah, so first of all, to what Scott Santoro had said, I'll tell you, I actually had the opportunity to go out to LAX and see what Delta's done in terms of all the safety protocols. And Scott, I have to tell you, I think the team's done a phenomenal job. They've been so detail oriented, and they've really created a seamless experience. So, I think if every airline does what Delta does, we're going to be in very good shape in terms of the recovery of the air industry. I think the other thing you said, and Doane, this goes exactly to what you're talking about in terms of a sustainable recovery, is I think travelers are increasingly getting more and more comfortable. We know that from the ongoing consumer sentiment research. And what they really do want to know is what to expect before they come to LA. One of the things that we found that's interesting is now more than ever, prospective travelers are going to destination marketing organizations like Los Angeles Tourism's websites because they want to see what those protocols are. So one of the things we've done, we actually are creating links out to all of our members so that prospective guests know before they come to LA, here's what they can expect. I think a second piece of that is in terms of the way we start to really promote Los Angeles again. One of the other things the research tells us is that people want to see us be very upfront and authentic about the reality right now. So an interesting stat is that 70% of people in the most recent round of consumer sentiment studies actually do want to see people in face coverings in the ads because it gives them a comfort level that we're being diligent and responsible. I think you're right. There certainly is uncertainty over the next few months. But I think one of the things that's going to stand LA in good stead, first of all, is the fact that working with state and county public health, we have taken a measured approach to this. So unlike some destinations that have opened and then pulled back and then opened and pulled back, I actually do anticipate that our reopening is going to be gradual and sustainable. But the other thing is I think we have to look backward in terms of what's happened historically. I think because LA, if you look at California, we're the fifth largest economy in the world. And if you look more locally, LA's economy is so diverse and is such a massive driver, not just for California, but for the country as a whole, that we have always recovered more quickly than other destinations nationally. So I think there's a lot of precedent for it. I think the thing we all just have to expect is that it's going to start here locally. We actually just started promoting Los Angeles in our drive markets, and people are looking to stay roughly within 250 miles of their home. But I think we'll start to see the return of drive markets. But I also think we'll see those short haul air markets come back this year. Realistically, it's going to take us about 2.5 years to 3 years to really see full recovery. But I think the fact that you hear what Universal's doing, you hear what Delta's doing, what all of our members are doing, I think this has been such a phenomenal partnership between our industry and our civic leaders that we're going to be able to get through this in a way that's more sustainable than virtually any other destination in the country. I guess the last thing I say is we can't forget the fact that right around the time we're coming out of this, prior to the pandemic, we had 9 straight years of record visitation. And that was without all of the incredible new product and events that are going to be on the books for the rest of the decade. So if you look at the next 2 to 3 years, we've got these incredible new assets like SoFi Stadium, like the Academy Museum of Motion and Pictures, the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. And on top of that, this incredible investment in infrastructure through the LAX modernization, the convention center modernization. So it's going to be a better LA experience than we've ever had before. And I think the other part of it is you look at what's already going to be shining a spotlight on LA virtually every year for the balance of the decade. In 2022, we're going to be hosting the Super Bowl and rescheduled the Major League Baseball All-Star Game. In 2023, we're going to be hosting the College Football Playoff National Championship Game, as well as the U.S. Open for golf out at the LA Country Club. In 24, we'll be hosting IPW, which is the world's largest global industry trade show. And then obviously World Cup in 26 and Olympic Games in 28. So when you look at that, I really can't think of any destination in the world that is better positioned for recovery over the next decade than LA.
Thanks, Adam. That's great. Well, we're going to move into the Q&A section of the program today. I think if you're watching, if you're still with us, you can ask questions through the chat. I've already got a couple of questions, so I'll pose this to the group and you guys can jump in and add whatever you'd like. Here's the first question. Many had to pivot and adjust to stay-at-home orders. What changes have you made that you think you'll keep after the pandemic?
You want me to take that? I can take.
Sure.
I can start at least from the Delta perspective. I mean, look, life. I don't think life will ever be the same as it was March 12th and before. I think there'll be a number of things that we will all have to examine as a society and move forward. I mean, do I see a world in the next 2 to 3, 4 years where we'll have cramped office space anymore? That is one area where I think we have definitely listened to the city and listened to the protocols that are out there. But we'll go to a very larger spacing model when we reopen our offices here very soon. One of the protocols that Delta is looking at, I mean, we've been temperature checking all employees since they started coming to work in April. And so those that are, sort of part of essential workers, which is the airline fell under, we temperature checked. Just starting just a few short months ago, we're now testing all employees for COVID-19 and ensuring that there's no virus that can come into our workplace, but more so importantly, even bring it back to their families at home. And so I think you'll see testing that will be part of an ongoing, particularly as rapid testing becomes more paramount. You will see a protocol that really drives for knowledge and information and fact-based, as opposed to the guessing games that we probably all went through in March and April and May. I do not believe that you will see an area where none of the folks on this call, I'm sure, but definitely from a Delta perspective, the clean thing is not just the 2019, 2020 cool thing to do. It will be here forever. It has changed our protocol. It has changed our procedures. It has changed the structure by which Delta has been founded on. And that is something that we will hold close to us. The last thing I will say on this topic, and some may agree or disagree, I don't believe this is a competition thing. And so, as Scott mentioned, we had the governor's office down here in Southern California. You hope that not only Universal was an A+, but that the competition in his area, in that industry, in that vertical, builds confidence for everyone. I mentioned the ecosystem. I believe if every airline, if every travel industry connoisseur out there did did to the level of what Delta is doing from a standard perspective, we will all come out of this in a much better situation than we entered it, if you will.
Yeah, Scott, I would just echo that. I think. Oh, go ahead, Scott.
No, I'm sorry, Adam. Yeah, you go ahead.
I was just going to say I would echo that. Doane, you had asked about vaccine. Honestly, I think a vaccine is certainly an important part of recovery from the pandemic, but I also think we have to be proud. And we've seen there have been some stops to some of the clinical tests where we really don't know when we're going to get a commercially available, broadly available. And I think one of the things we have to be realistic about is the challenges we've seen nationally in just getting 3 out of 4 people to wear a face covering in public. So, if you listen to what Dr. Fauci shared, it's that really to get to herd immunity, we'd have to get 4 people to take the vaccine. And I'm just not sure that that's going to happen. I think what Scott just pointed about in terms of rapid, that's really going to be the game changer for this. The airline leaning into the notion of doing rapid tests where people get on board, and I think that's what's going to get consumer confidence back. And the advances there have been remarkable. If you think about it, just 120 days ago, it cost about $100 per person to do a test, and you had to wait sometimes 7 to 14 days to get a result. Right now, we're just 120 days later, the cost has come down to as low as $10 a person, and getting test results in 15 to 30 minutes. So I think the rapid testing is going to be something that's going to stay with us in perpetuity.
Anything else, Scott? Scott, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, I was just going to add, I think the other big bucket, I would reiterate exactly what Adam and Scott Santoro said in terms of the industry working together. I speak with my colleagues across the industry probably daily in terms of what we were talking about and collaboratively working together. So I think that is a definite a positive in terms of what's come out of all of this. I would say the other large area too is the transactions. While we were moving already to a much more cashless transaction and less contact transaction, I think that's something that will be a legacy that we'll see an exponential change in as we evolve post-opening.
That's a good point. So much of this is about communication. I had a conversation with the architecture firm that's planning the expansion of the convention center, and they actually called it the theater of cleanliness. That will have to continue. We've always had very clean facilities, airlines, theme parks. A lot of this is done without people seeing it. Now it's going to be important for people to see us do that work in front of them. So that's kind of the theater that he's talking about is making sure that people actually see us scrubbing down handrails, rather than doing it when it's closed. We'll still do it when it's closed, but just adding that to give consumers more confidence and assurance. The other thing we're looking at the convention center is now the value of open space and outdoor facilities. So we're relooking at some of the designs to maximize our plazas, our rooftops, and even having operable windows in meeting spaces and exhibit halls. So those are some of the things that we see definitely changing as we move forward. We've got another question here. Not sure if this applies, but we'll ask it. Are there any unexpected partnerships that have emerged that you did not anticipate that will have a positive impact?
I can definitely say for sure, we have struck many new partnerships from the Delta Airlines perspective. We just about 4 months ago, we entered into an agreement with the Mayo Clinic now, and they examine every aspect of our operation. They fly in flight. They make recommendations in flight. They look at our on-ground facilities. They look at our employee break rooms. If you think about, if you ever thought prior to March 12th and before that, an employee break room mattered from a cleanliness perspective, it did, but now more so than ever, because if that employee break room isn't clean, that employee is walking into an operation and then could be spreading. And so the Mayo Clinic has been a paramount and pivotal partner for Delta in just one of the many, many relationships that we have. I could spend an hour on partnerships, but that is one that if you told me prior to March that we'd be teamed up with a medical expert and consulting Delta on a day in and day out basis, I would have said you're crazy. But now we don't make a move without them, whether it's food and beverage on board to employee break rooms, etc.
Very good. Anyone else on partnerships?
Yeah, I would just add that our medical teams, we're probably closer involved with them now than we ever have, and it's a great partnership. They give us some great insight in terms of things to think about, both from things we've already talked about, air circulation, the testing, how we can do contact tracing if we need to, and that is great. We didn't have that level, I think, of partnership previously, and I think that will continue throughout what we're doing in our operations.
Very
Yeah,
good.
and I would agree with something that Scott Strobel said earlier, which is, I think from a partnership perspective, it's brought the whole industry closer together, because I think the reality at the end of the day is we're only as strong as our weakest link. And there's just this responsibility now that I think everyone in our industry feels, both professionally and personally, to make sure that we're being vigilant about these protocols, because no one in the industry wants to see us take a step backward. So I think one of the silver linings for me is I think it's just brought our overall industry much closer, and I've seen closer and tighter collaborations than I think we've seen in a long time, and that can only be a good thing for our industry overall.
Very good.
Very much agree.
Here's a question from Andrea Nunn. What are some key technological advancements or futuristic ideas that are helping to transform and reimagine the tourism and hospitality experience? So, a question on innovation, technology, and the future.
Yeah, I think one thing, and I could speak to it, and I think we saw this actually with our Delta partners as well as others in the airline industry, but the electrostatic cleaners that we're using are really kind of a game changer in terms of how quickly we can clean surfaces and areas in a very quick and efficient way. And leave those so that they are completely sanitized. And so the way that we're going to implement a lot of those devices when we reopen, I think is a big game changer.
Yeah,
I would agree
say,
that we're also
even pre-pandemic. Go ahead, Scott.
No, please, after you.
Oh, I was just, something we were talking about even prior to the pandemic, but I think, 5G is going to be a legitimate game changer for our industry in a lot of ways. We've been talking about, the Internet of Things and what that enables. But if you look at the Los Angeles Convention Center was the first center in the country to be completely wired for 5G and, agnostic to different carriers. So I think, there are a lot of things that LA was already doing right before the pandemic. One of them is 5G, and that's going to completely reimagine some of the things we can do technologically. I think another thing is we were already doing a lot of things virtually to enhance the visitor experience so that when the pandemic hit, we were able to pivot very quickly. So a good example is in the sales world, we had already developed pretty extensive 360-degree virtual tours of Los Angeles and all of its major attractions, because we knew while certainly we were hosting a lot of clients here and event planners, there were times they just weren't able to make it out here. So because we already had that ready to go, really being able to have virtual tours and virtual client events has continued to keep LA top of mind. Even doing things like holography. Our marketing and sales teams did a great job of creating a 3D immersive experience that uses holograms to show what the reimagined LA Convention Center is going to look like. And we can take that to trade shows. So again, between 5G and immersive technology, we're able to really showcase the future of LA before it's even here.
Very good. Okay. Anyone else on that topic? I'm sorry. Do we?
I was just going to say, I just love the two questions, to be honest with you, because it is going to be about partnerships, whether it's with government, medical facilities, but it's also anything that we do from this point forward is going to all be about innovation, biotech, technical, sort of a technical theory to get us out of some of these clean measures. Because if you told me about electrostatic spraying in February, I would not even have known what you're talking about. Now I've seen it up close. I know the effects that it can have, and there's many different things that we're doing to evaluate that process as well. So I think just more to come, whether it's ultraviolet light, whether it's examining touch points with swabs to ensure that there's no virus and detection. I think will all play into technological advances.
Yeah, I know Adam and I have talked about this, but as we get used to contact tracing and some of the apps that are really tracking our movements, I kind of hope there's a day where, visitors can opt into an app when they arrive in Los Angeles and allow attractions and companies to communicate with them, not only while they're here, but before they come and after they go home. But is there a way for these apps to allow us to say, hey, we see you're on Hollywood Boulevard. Would you like to stop into Musso and Frank's, for dinner tonight and offer you a free appetizer, or location-based apps such as that. Our phones know everything about us. Does my phone know that I listen to a lot of jazz? And if that's the case, hey, when I'm in New York City, could it send me some locations that I might want to check out, or New Orleans, or certainly Los Angeles? So I'm hoping that something comes out of this these apps that are following what we do, and of course, if we opt into them only. Here's
Well, Don, I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to agree with you. Please. No, I agree with you 100% what you just said.
That's great. Here's another one. Can you share a bit about how you've adapted your marketing and communication given consumer sentiment research that Adam shared about? Maybe that's a good one for Adam. How have you adapted your marketing and communication?
Sure. So a couple things on that. The first thing is, I think it has to come off as authentic. I think the one thing we've seen is there's a balancing act we have to strike. What consumers have clearly said is they do want to see health and safety in our promotional materials and advertising now. So anything that doesn't show some of those safety protocols is going to create distrust among consumers. But the other part of it is it's very clear from the consumer sentiment research that they don't want it to come off as being, for lack of a better word, authoritarian. They want to see that these destinations are still welcoming and that there's a way that those safety protocols can be implemented in a way that isn't overly intrusive. And again, looking at what Delta's done, looking at what Universal has designed, I think we just have to reflect that in our promotional campaigns for the foreseeable future, because that's what's going to give people the confidence to start traveling again. I think the second piece of it is we have to recognize this is really an inversion of the way we've always marketed the destination. Historically, our international guests have by far been our most lucrative audience. In fact, it takes about 2.5 domestic long-haul travelers to equal the spend of one international guest. And it's because they tend to stay here longer and spend more. Well, as we've seen international travel really grind to a halt, and by the way, we're still committed to the international marketplace. There's no question that business will come back, but really it all starts closer to home now. So we're starting with talking to locals and then branching out from there. So I think, really talking to locals as part of our long-term marketing strategy, that's going to be a constant. I think we always need to be mindful of the fact that Angelinos are just as much a part of our business, and especially, Scott, for Universal Studios Hollywood, maybe you want to talk about just how much of your business comes from Angelinos and from Californians.
Yeah, no, great question, great point, Adam. That is the thing that we are fortunate with. While we obviously expect the international travel to be near zero by the time we reopen, we do get nearly a third, and at certain times of the year, it gets up to 40% of our visitors are local Angelinos. So we think we have a great product. And one of the points that we made to the state, whether they like it or not, people are still traveling, and Angelinos don't have enough things to do right now. And as such, they're leaving the local market and traveling to places like Las Vegas or, other areas around the country. And I think we have some amazing products here in our local market. We just need to get back open and allow those options for our local market. And we're ready to do so.
Very good. Well, it is 12:07, and we're supposed to wrap up at 12:08. So let's give everyone a chance to say a few words in closing. We'll start with Adam Burke.
I just appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation. I think, the more we can continue to collaborate on this, I think one of the silver linings I take away from this is it's really shown the strength of our community. I think across the board, everyone has, as you said, Scott Strobel, this is really not about competition. It's about us helping to lift each other up. And I just have a great deal of pride in how Los Angeles as a community has reacted to this. So I would just say, let's remember that there are definitely still brighter days ahead, and we have every reason to believe that Los Angeles is still going to be one of the premier global destinations for the next decade and beyond.
Very good. How about Scott Santoro?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. And to the panelists and to obviously the committee that pulled this together, this has been an amazing, amazing conversation. And all I would say is we're proud to partner in Los Angeles, whether it's with the city and the specific offices, with the mayor, whether it's with LAWA, with all of you. We're here for you wherever here may be in the future, but we're ready to serve you. We're ready to fly you. And I know you're more importantly, we're ready to fly your folks in here as well. So thank you very much for having Delta participate today. We greatly appreciate your partnership.
Thanks, Scott. And Scott Strobel?
Yeah, I'll wrap mine quick. Thank you, Doane. Really appreciate your ability to moderate this, and thank you to the other panelists, Adam and Scott, too, for your engagement, and also to Maria and her team from the Chamber. We had the dubious distinction of 7 months ago yesterday since we closed. And, I think Angelenos as well as, our team are hungry for entertainment options and want to do that. And we encourage, and we'll continue to work with the governor's office to get open. And I think we can do it in a very safe and effective manner. And we are ready to do so and put people back to work. So thank you again. We're all in this together and we're going to get through it.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. It's been a very informative and interesting hour with you all. I promised to wrap up on time so that we could all listen to my boss, the mayor of Los Angeles, in the next session. So make sure you tune in. I think after a 20-minute break, he'll be on at 12:30. So thank you all, and thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doane. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Reimagining Tourism and Hospitality session. Up next is our final session of the day, a mayor-to-mayor conversation, local leadership in a pandemic. We will see you back at 12:30 p.m.